My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old. And 18 months ago I discovered that my father, the man I loved most in this world, had been living a lie longer than I've been alive. I found the passport on a Wednesday. By Friday I knew his real name wasn't the one on my birth certificate. By Sunday I knew about the other family. I stood in his bedroom, his coffee mug still on the nightstand, holding a document that told me my entire identity was built on a secret I never agreed to. I wasn't angry at first. I was just still. Because suddenly, 100 small moments from my childhood were rearranging themselves into a shape I didn't want to see. I have the documents. I have the letter he never meant anyone to find. And I'm telling you everything. But first, if you're new here, subscribe and drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Now let me take you back to where it all started. My father died on a Thursday morning. No drama. No final words. He had a heart condition we'd monitored for years, so when the hospital called, it was sad but not surprising. I drove there alone, signed the papers alone, and went straight to his house to start packing his things. I wasn't looking for anything. Third bedroom, top shelf of his wardrobe, behind a stack of old coats he hadn't worn in years. A shoebox. I almost left it, but the weight of it was wrong, too heavy for something forgotten. I lifted the lid. Old receipts, a watch I didn't recognize, and underneath everything, a navy blue passport. I assumed it was expired. I almost tossed it into the donation pile without a second thought. Then I opened it. His face looked back at me. Same eyes, same jaw, same small scar above his left eyebrow. But the name printed beneath that photo? I had never seen it in my life. Not once. Not in 34 years of being his daughter. I sat down on the floor right there. Didn't move. Didn't call anyone. I just kept staring at that name, wondering how the man who raised me had an entire identity I knew absolutely nothing about. Here's what made it so hard to process. My father wasn't a mysterious man. He wasn't distant or secretive. He was the dad who showed up to every school play, who called every Sunday without fail, who remembered every small thing, your favorite chocolate, the name of your childhood best friend, the exact date of your first heartbreak. Everyone loved him. Neighbors, colleagues. Every single person at his funeral stood up and said the same thing, dependable, honest, the kind of man you could set your watch by. And I believed every word, because that was the man I knew. But sitting on that bedroom floor, passport in my hands, I started remembering things differently. The business trips that came with no real details. Cities mentioned once, never again. A phone that was always flipped face down. A drawer in his study that was always locked. And when I once asked about it as a teenager, he laughed it off so smoothly I forgot I'd even asked. I'd filed all of it under normal dad things. Now every single one of those moments felt like a door I should have opened. He wasn't just private. He was careful. There's a difference, and I was only now learning what that difference actually looked like. The passport was still in my hand, and I hadn't even looked at the issue date yet. I turned the passport over and checked the issue date. It was issued 3 years before I was born. My hands went cold. This wasn't something recent. This wasn't a mistake or a legal technicality from later in his life. This identity existed before I did. Before my mother did. Before our house, our family, our last name meant anything to anyone. I flipped through the pages. Stamps. Dozens of them. Countries I knew he'd visited for work, but also countries he'd never once mentioned. Not casually. Not ever. There was a stamp from a city just 4 hours from where I grew up. No trip. No explanation. No memory of him ever being gone those particular dates. I photographed every single page. Then I put the passport in my bag, closed the shoebox, finished packing like nothing had happened. I don't know why I did that. Maybe I needed time before I said it out loud, because saying it out loud made it real, and I wasn't ready for it to be real yet. I drove home that night in complete silence. No music. No phone calls. Just me and that passport sitting on the passenger seat like a person I didn't recognize. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had one question I couldn't shake. If his name wasn't real, what else wasn't? I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with a passport photograph spread across my laptop screen, and I started with the most basic thing possible. I Googled the name. Daniel Ashford. That's what it said. Daniel James Ashford. Born 1951. Nationality British. My father was American. Born in Ohio. I had seen his birth certificate. I had held it in my own hands when we renewed his driving license 2 years before he died. But Daniel Ashford was British. And the passport was genuine. Not a forgery. Not a prop. An actual issued document with actual government stamps across 14 pages. I typed the name into every search I could think of. Social media, public records, obituaries, old newspaper archives. Nothing. Daniel James Ashford existed on that passport and nowhere else on the entire internet. Which meant one of two things. Either that name was so carefully constructed that every trace of it lived only on paper, or Daniel Ashford was never meant to be found by someone like me, sitting alone in a kitchen at 2 a.m. shaking. I called my mother the next morning. Kept my voice completely flat. Told her I was still sorting Dad's things. Asked her casually, had Dad ever mentioned anyone named Daniel? Old friend maybe. Work contact. She paused for just a second too long. Then she said no. Why? And something in that pause told me she was lying. I didn't push my mother. Not yet. I needed more before I walked into that conversation. Because if she was hiding something, I wanted to walk in with enough that she couldn't deny it. I went back to his house the next day. This time I wasn't packing. I was searching. I started with his study, the locked drawer I remembered from childhood. I found the key in the lining of his old briefcase, sewn in. Not dropped in. Not forgotten. Deliberately placed there by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The drawer had 3 things inside. A mobile phone I had never seen. Dead battery. A small notebook with no label. And an envelope with my mother's name written on the front in handwriting that wasn't my father's. I charged the phone first. It was locked. But the network carrier name on the screen was British. Not American. The SIM was registered to a UK number. I opened the notebook. Dates going back 20 years. Amounts of money. A recurring name written in the margin of almost every page. Not a full name, just initials. A. Over and over again. Sometimes circled. Sometimes underlined so hard the pen had torn the paper slightly. E.V meant nothing to me. But the amounts next to those initials were not small. Whoever E.V was, my father had been paying them. Consistently. For 2 decades. And nobody in my family had any idea. I took everything. The phone. The notebook. The envelope with my mother's name. I put it all in my bag and locked the house behind me. I didn't open the envelope. Not yet. It had my mother's name on it and some part of me felt that whatever was inside, she deserved to see it first. Or maybe I was just scared of what opening it would mean. I focused on the phone. I took it to a repair shop and had the battery replaced. Told them it was my late husband's. Didn't want questions. That night I sat with it and tried every combination I could think of. Birthdays. Anniversaries. My birthday. Nothing. Then I tried the year on the passport. 1951 it opened. There were text messages. The most recent one was 4 days before my father died. Sent to a contact saved only as a single letter, R. The message said, "It's nearly time. I'm sorry it took this long." I read it 6 times. Nearly time for what? Sorry to whom? For what exactly? I scrolled back further. The messages with R went back 3 years. Short. Careful. Never names. Never location spelled out fully. But the tone was intimate. Not romantic. Something older than that. Something that read like 2 people carrying the same weight for a very long time. Then I found a photo sent in a message 2 years ago. A house. A front garden. A woman standing at the door. And next to her, 2 children. I drove to my mother's house the next morning. Didn't call ahead. Didn't plan what I was going to say. I just drove. She opened the door in her dressing gown, cup of tea in hand, and the moment she saw my face she went completely still. I walked past her into the kitchen, put the passport on the table, put the notebook next to it, put the phone face up with the message to R pulled open on the screen. Then I sat down and waited. She didn't say anything for a long time. She stood at the kitchen counter with her back to me. I could see her shoulders. I watched her breathe. In, out, slow and deliberate, the way you breathe when you are fighting very hard to stay composed. Then she sat down. She looked at the passport first, picked it up, turned it over once, set it back down like it weighed nothing. And she said, "I wondered when you'd find it. Not what is this? Not where did you get this? I wondered when you'd find it." I couldn't speak. She had known. Not recently. Not just before he died. She had known for a long time. Long enough that finding it wasn't a shock. It was just an inevitability she had been quietly waiting on. I asked her one question. "How long?" She looked at me across the table and said, "Since before you were born, Sarah. Since the very beginning." I left my mother's house without another word. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to sit somewhere quiet and figure out what since the very beginning actually meant for everything I thought I knew about my own life. Because if my father's real name wasn't real, what did that make my name? I went home and called a solicitor. Didn't explain everything. Just asked enough questions to understand the legal shape of what I was dealing with. What I learned stopped me cold. A second passport under a false identity isn't just a secret. It's a federal offense. Carries prison time. It means every document connected to that identity, every contract, every financial record, every legal agreement, exists in a gray area that doesn't dissolve just because the person is dead. It follows the family. I asked about inheritance. About property. About whether our house, the house I grew up in, was purchased under his real name or the other one. The solicitor went quiet for a moment. Then she said I needed to bring in the documents before she could say anything further. I hung up and opened my laptop. I searched how someone actually obtains a second passport. The answers were more accessible than I expected. More common than anyone admits publicly. People do it through residency programs, through ancestry claims, through channels that are legal in some countries and completely illegal in others. My father wasn't unusual. He was just careful. And careful people, I was learning, leave very specific trails when you finally know what to look for. I went back to the photo on the phone. The woman at the door. The two children beside her. A red brick house with a small garden. A street sign partially visible at the edge of the frame. I zoomed in. Magnolia Close. I ran it through every UK map search I could find cross-reference with the stamps in the passport. Narrowed it down to a town in Shropshire. Small. Quiet. The kind of place nobody looks twice at anything. I booked a train ticket the same night. I told nobody where I was going. I found the street in under 20 minutes of arriving. Stood at the corner for a long time before I moved. The red brick house was exactly as it appeared in the photo. Same door. Same garden. A child's bicycle leaning against the front wall. I knocked. The woman who answered was in her mid-50s. Dark hair. Tired eyes. She looked at me and I watched something move across her face. Recognition, confusion, and then something that looked almost like relief. She said, "You look exactly like him." I said, "I'm Sarah, his daughter." She stepped back from the door. Let me in without another word. Her name was Ellen. Ellen Voss. She sat across from me in a small living room and told me she had two sons, aged 26 and 23. My father had been in their lives since before either of them was born. He had two families, simultaneously, for over 30 years. Ellen didn't cry. Neither did I. We sat across from each other in that small living room like two people who had both just realized they were holding opposite ends of the same rope. She spoke first. She told me my father came into her life when she was 22. That he was kind, consistent, that he never pretended to be single. He told her about my mother early on. Told her it was complicated. That he was trying to find a way out. He said that for 30 years. I asked her about the name. Daniel Ashford. She said that was the name she knew him by. That she had never heard the name Robert Webb until the day he died, and a solicitor contacted her about a small amount of money he had left in a separate account. A solicitor she never hired. Documents she never requested. He had planned for this moment. Quietly. Carefully. From a distance. I asked her the question I had been carrying since the wardrobe. Why the passport? Why a second identity? Why not just leave? She looked at her hands for a moment. Then she said he told her once years ago that the name came from before either of us. That there was something in his past he had never fully closed the door on. Something that made having an exit, a clean one, feel necessary. He never told her what. But she believed him. And sitting in that room, I almost did too. Ellen left the room and came back with an envelope. Cream-colored. Sealed. My name written on the front in my father's handwriting. She said he left it with her 2 years ago. Told her if anything ever happened to him and I came looking, to give it to me directly. Not my mother. Me. I took it outside to read alone. I sat on a low wall at the edge of her front garden. Hands steady. Breathing slow. I opened it. 3 pages. Handwritten. Both sides. He started with my name. Just Sarah. Nothing after it for a full line. Like he had sat with the page for a long time before he continued. He wrote that he was sorry. Not in the way people write sorry when they want forgiveness. In the way people write sorry when they know forgiveness isn't the point. He told me the second identity wasn't about Ellen. It existed before her. Before my mother. Before everything. He was 23. A different country. A situation he described only as something I was involved in that I could not walk away from cleanly. He needed to disappear from one life before he could build another. He built 2 instead. Then near the bottom of the second page, one line that made me stop completely. The passport was never the biggest secret, Sarah. Look at the back of your birth certificate. The original. Not the copy. I didn't have it with me. I was on the first train home before I finished reading the last page. I found the original birth certificate in my mother's filing cabinet. She was sitting right there when I pulled it out. Didn't stop me. Didn't ask what I was looking for. Just watched me over the rim of her teacup with that same composed, waiting expression she'd had since the kitchen table. I turned it over. Handwritten on the back in ink so faded I had to hold it under the kitchen light to read it. A name. A date. And the words, biological father confirmed. The name wasn't Robert Webb. It wasn't Daniel Ashford either. It was someone I had never heard of. A third name. A real one, I could feel it. No passport. No constructed identity. Just a name written on the back of my birth certificate by someone who needed it recorded somewhere even if nowhere official would ever hold it. I looked at my mother. She set her cup down. And for the first time since this started, she cried. Not loudly. Just quietly. The way you cry when something you carried alone for 34 years finally has somewhere to land. She told me everything. Right there at the kitchen table. All of it. And I'm not ready to share that part yet. Not because I'm protecting anyone. But because what she told me that afternoon sent me down a path I am still walking. New documents. New questions. A man still living who doesn't know I exist. I thought finding the passport was the beginning of the truth. It wasn't even close.